What if the way you influence others wasn't just about persuasion, but about eternal impact? In today's conversation, we're diving into the connection between ethical influence and faith-based principles. You'll hear how time-tested psychology blends with spiritual truth, equipping you to lead with integrity, inspire lasting change, and make a difference that truly matters. Today, I'm talking with Brian Ahearn about how faith and influence intersect in powerful ways. We'll be unpacking insights from the new book, Influence from Above, which blends Dr. Robert Cialdini's world-renowned principles of influence with faith-centered perspectives. If you've ever wondered how your leadership, your words, and your actions can not only shape behavior, but also align with eternal values, you're going to love this conversation.
Welcome to Biz Help for You, the show that saves you the expensive learning curve by providing advice from industry experts in every facet of the entrepreneurial journey. Too many small businesses collapse. According to the U.S. Census Bureau, 20% fail within their first year, and less than 35% make it to their 10th anniversary. The goal of this podcast is to change that statistic. So if you're interested in learning more to be a successful entrepreneur, tune in today.
So Brian, welcome to the show.
Thank you for having me back on, Candy. It's great to see you and to get a chance to talk again.
I'm glad to have you here again, too. So for those who are listening and maybe haven't heard of you, I will refer back to the fact that you've been on here, I think 2 or 3 times now, talking about your books and Dr. Cialdini, his information that you learned from him, too. And now we're here to talk about your new book. So I'm excited to have you here. And I would love for you maybe just to give a brief little bit of information about yourself, your background, and how did you start working with Dr. Cialdini?
Sure. Well, I spent the entirety of my career in the insurance industry until I left 7 years ago to pursue influence people full time. I came in contact with Dr. Cialdini more than 20 years ago, and it was completely by chance. I like to tell people there were 2 happy accidents in my life. The first one was meeting my wife on the first day of work right out of college, and the second was meeting Dr. Cialdini. And it was completely random meeting him because a coworker had given me a video of him presenting at Stanford, and right away I was like, wow, the psychology he's talking about, it's the foundation of all selling. I was involved with sales training. It was all research-based, which really appealed to me. I'm a very analytical individual, and it gave me confidence to share what he was talking about with others. And then the third thing was his stance on ethics, that he was very clear about non-manipulative ways to influence people. Well, I signed up for Stanford's marketing, and they had a lot of great materials, but one day one of their marketing flyers hit my desk, and as I was paging through it, I saw Dr. Cialdini's picture, and in bold letters at the top it said bestseller, and right underneath that, in bold letters, it said call it influence, persuasion, or even manipulation. And I was just like, I can't believe they used that word, because he's so clear in his presentation about non-manipulative ways to influence people. So I guess I'll say, Candy, the moral part of me decided to address it, and I emailed Stanford, basically saying I don't know anybody who wants to be manipulated, don't know anybody who's looking to become a good manipulator. That word cannot be helping sales. It's probably really hurting. I never heard from Stanford, but sometime later my phone rang at work, and it was a representative of Dr. Cialdini's. Her name was Chris. And she said, I'm calling to thank you on behalf of Dr. Cialdini. Came to our attention that you sent an email to Stanford, and because of it, they're changing the marketing of our materials. And I just thought, wow, that is really cool, and how neat to be able to have this conversation with her. Well, as fate would have it, before she hung up, she said, if your company is ever looking for a guest speaker, Dr. Cialdini travels the world to talk about this. I said, you know what? I sit next to the lady who plans our events and books our speakers. Would you like me to introduce you? And so I transferred the call. In summer of 2004, Bob was in Columbus, Ohio, several times to address the insurance agents that represented the company. And that was the beginning of my relationship with him.
Nice. Well, I know I just mentioned in the intro too, that you've written other books, and now, you have written this book, Influence from Above. I would love, what made you decide to write this one that has more of a faith-based content over, the other ones that were just still really good? I enjoyed reading what you had before and learning about the influence. What brought you to this topic?
My daughter. So she had seen me do a presentation here in town, and shortly after that, we had lunch to talk about it. And during the conversation, she asked the question that was the genesis for the book. She said, "Dad, what I want to know is, where is God in all this? All this psychology that you're teaching, where does God fit into it?" And so we started to have this great conversation. I said, "Well, you know what, Abigail, in business, I may not really be able to talk about love, but if I employ this principle of liking the right way, that it's not about me getting you to like me, Candy, it's about me coming to know and like you, that begins to change everything, because I want what's best for my friends." Right. And so as we talked about that, I said, now we're getting pretty close to love. Or another example, reciprocity. If I do something kind for you, you feel like you would like to do something kind for me in return. Well, Jesus said, it's better to give than receive. Do unto others as you would have them do unto you. And so as we had the conversation, I started really seeing that underneath Cialdini's principles, there was a foundation of spiritual truth. And so that was what stimulated the idea for the book. Now, I didn't start the book until many, many years later, because I had lots of other things going on, but that's where it all started, was her question.
Mm-hmm. So is this really for people of faith who, maybe have some similar beliefs, or really can this be for anyone, whether, they're entrepreneurs or in ministry, or really just anyone who wants to increase their influence?
Well, I think it can be for anybody. But without a doubt, people who are fans of Dr. Cialdini's work, I think, will be very interested to see what the connection is to spiritual truths. And I think people who are faith-based, who also want to be able to bring that integrity into what they do, but how do I combine it with some things that research tells us about how we can be more effective to influence people, right? Because in neither case do we want people to feel like they're manipulating. I think the book helps bring those two together so people can avoid that. But I really would also hope that somebody who is just curious, maybe they're just exploring and they want to see, is there really a connection between what we do in terms of our business and what we do in terms of our faith? Are those things separate, or can we actually bring them together? And I'm a big proponent that we can bring them together in a way that is not preachy, but is still coming across, that is honoring to God, and yet using what psychology tells us are the best ways to influence people.
Mm-hmm. Right. Because like you're saying, when we are talking with people and, we want to have influence and help people make decisions. It could even be a parent wanting to influence the child, in a positive way. We want to do that in the right way, and we don't want to be seen, in this negative perspective. And, some of the people that are, followers of Christ, are looking to the Bible for things too. And there's people of other faiths who have their own, beliefs on things too. But overall, like you're saying, there's really where these two can be married, right? Where you could have your faith that is actually impacting your influence too. So do you want to go in more detail about how that faith can really impact your influence as well?
I think the biggest thing for me is I think about my journey with Dr. Cialdini's material, right? I saw it on a video and it resonated. I began to show the video and utilize it. Started becoming much more familiar with it, and then had the opportunity to go through personal training with Dr. Cialdini back in 2008. When I got done with that, I thought I knew what I was talking about. And compared to the vast majority of people, I did, because I learned from Dr. Cialdini, who's considered the godfather of influence. But like anything in life, the more that you go on a journey and the more that you learn, you start to go to deeper levels. For me, one of those deeper levels was recognizing, as I mentioned earlier, the principle of liking isn't about getting people to like us. It's about coming to like the people that we are with. And that brought that to a deeper level, because I started to recognize I do want what's best for my friends. And so when I go out of my way to find every way to get to know and like the people that I'm with, I will work harder, longer. I'll be more creative. When mistakes are made, there's more room for grace. All of these positive things come out of that. So for me, that was yet another level in terms of recognizing how to ethically leverage Dr. Cialdini's material. I really feel like in writing the book and then looking at so many verses from the Bible that support this, that brings it to an even deeper level where it's not just about wanting the success and happiness for people, but wanting to have an eternal impact on them. And I really believe that we can do that. I will give you an example where there's somebody that I've done work with over the years. At one point, the work kind of dried up a little bit, and he said, "Hey, I don't know that there's going to be any real opportunity for you given the way the economy is." And my response was, "That's okay, because I really like you and I want to make sure that we stay in touch." Well, time went by, my daughter got married. I sent an email and let him know, and he was, very, very happy for us. And then he said, "Hey, I'm getting married next year in Germany. I would love it if you and Jane would come." So we're like, wow, an opportunity to go to Germany and stay in Europe for a few weeks? Absolutely. So our relationship kept getting deeper. Well, then at some point, as we maintained our friendship, he talked about family and that they were going through the process of in vitro fertilization. And I was like, that's how our daughter was born. Right. So we went from what we'll call the principle of liking into unity, where we had this shared identity because we both deeply understood not just the process of in vitro fertilization, but all of the emotion and heartache and things that can go into that. And it was so wonderful this summer to get an email from him saying, "Hey, we're pregnant and we're going to have a little girl in December." But for me, I feel like I'm having an eternal impact on him. And that's, I think, a lot of what the book looks at. How do we get to that deepest level where we feel like we are not just helping people, which is so good and so right to want to see them succeed in their business and to want to have them enjoy happiness at home, but having that eternal impact, it lasts forever.
Well, I think a lot of times too, we may not even know we are making an impact on someone because someone may not tell us. In this case, like you're making an impact and you've built that relationship and it's become very close. But there may even be people we're impacting as well that we don't even know. So, what do you say regarding like that part of having influence when we're not even aware necessarily that we are?
Yeah, I think that is some of the most authentic influence that we can have. You've probably had this, Candy. I've had it where people will come back and maybe say something like, when we talked about A, B, and C, and you told me this, that meant so much to me. And I'll smile and nod, and I'm thinking, I don't even remember the conversation, right? So what that tells me is I wasn't going in feeling like I had answers and I can guide them and I can do this, which is not a bad desire. But it came from a place that was so genuine that there was nothing contrived about it or anything. But where I think understanding these principles of influence still come into play, the more that you internalize them, the more that you use them to kind of shape your view of humanity and how people think, feel, and behave, it becomes second nature to you. Like so many things we learn in life that are relegated to the subconscious. We've learned it, it's there, and now it drives our behavior without thinking. And so I really believe that when we understand these principles, they can have that same kind of impact where we can be influencing people much better than we used to, but we're almost not even having to consciously think about it because it's just who we are.
hmm hmm Yeah, I actually had an example yesterday too, where someone had reached out to me, I think it was on Friday, saying that she's retiring and she's going to be closing her business down, as of September. And so we won't be working with her after that. And she's been a client of mine since 2005. So, I just thanked her for all the years that we've worked together and I've appreciated it and I wished her the best. And then she wrote back and she said, "Thank you for all you've done. You have inspired me and I've really looked up to you and I appreciate all the things you've done and you've taught me bookkeeping and you've taught me how to run my business effectively." And she'd never said anything in all the years I had worked with her. And like that actually hit me too. Like I didn't realize how much of an impact I make. I know when I help people too, I give them peace of mind and, financial clarity and all of those things too. But just like her commenting on that, just made me realize like I was making an impact more than I knew. And she was expressing that right at the end of the relationship of us working together.
That's awesome. And the word inspired or inspiration means God breathed, right? So in a sense, it was eternal, comes from an eternal source, at least.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I would love for you maybe to just give a little bit more of an overview of your book. What can readers expect when they pick it up to learn more about this influence and the commingling of faith and influence?
Okay. The story arc is this. I had written a book several years ago called The Influencer: Secrets to Success and Happiness. And in that book, the main character, his name is John Andrews, and you follow John through his life, through his schooling and his career. And the book ends with him in his mid to early 50s, and he retires. And I did think when I ended the book that, there's potentially another book here because he's got a whole life ahead of him. But I didn't have the inspiration for it until my daughter asked the question. So this book, Influence from Above, picks up about 18 months after he's retired. And he's starting to realize there has to be more to life than just now enjoying the fruits of my labor. Vacations are wonderful, or playing golf is wonderful, but there has to be something more. And he always had a base of faith in the previous book. He talked a little bit about when he was growing up and going to church, but he gets involved with a building project at his church. It's a community center. And he starts to recognize that the things I learned in business, while they can be helpful, may not be the things that are going to be able to influence people in a faith-based setting. But at the same time, the things that people talk about in a faith-based setting may not be able to influence people in the secular world. And so he's having to kind of bring these two together. And then through his study of the Bible, he starts to recognize the connection between Cialdini's principles and faith-based principles. And everything plays out in a story format as he's running into challenges and having to use what he's learning about faith and influence to overcome the obstacles that are being put in front of him. I think people who move into retirement could possibly find a lot of inspiration from that because, again, playing so much golf for most people is probably not going to cut it. Wanting to have a sense of purpose. I also think within the faith-based community, we see large churches popping up all the time, and that means they're going through building funds and building projects and things like that. So I think there's a whole host of people who are connected with churches who would say, hey, maybe we can learn some things to help us with our building campaign, the building fund, et cetera, that could help make it more successful.
Mm-hmm. So should someone, and I did enjoy that book you talked about too in the story and like learning the principles through his story, but so should someone really read that first book too to kind of get the background of his character and what he was learning and then read this one, or is this like a standalone book as well?
You wouldn't have to the way it's written, you wouldn't have to. There are snippets throughout the book that kind of refer back to the book, some of the lessons he remembers from whether it was childhood or his business career that he's enlightened by as he's going through this process. But one of the things, Candy, that I'm offering people, and so you can make this offer to your listeners, anybody who buys the book, I'm not going to make you jump through hoops to send me a receipt, but if you email me in the subject line the title of the second chapter, I will give you access to a free PDF copy of that book, The Influencer. So for people who either want to read it first and then read Influence Above, or if they read Influence from Above and they go, this is pretty good, I want to find out more of the backstory of John, they would have opportunity to do that as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I have read lots of business books too, and I did really enjoy that too because of the way that you had it as a story and how he's learning different principles through that. And so is that how this other book is too, The Influence from Above? It's definitely like his like going through and learning lessons, and that's, how you're presenting all of the information is through that story?
Yes. In this one, his wife Abigail is a lot more prominent. She is somebody that he leans on heavily. You'll be introduced to characters in the church, outside the church, people in the business community where he is interacting with and learning from, but also having to put into practice in a different way the principles supported by the spiritual truths to be able to move everything forward, because they all believe that the community center is a wonderful project for the city, but they run into roadblocks because there are people that, no matter how good your motive may be for wanting to do something like that, may resist by thinking, I don't want something that's supported by a faith-based community, or, they just want to do this to get kids in there so they can preach to them. And so he's running into a lot of resistance. But even in the resistance, the things that he's learning about influence and spiritual truths just continue to grow.
Okay, so I know too, you say that Cialdini has a core motives model for the heart, mind, body, and soul. Can you talk about that framework and how it can guide our daily choices?
Sure. So Dr. Cialdini's partner, Dr. Greg Neidert, came up with something called the core motives model. People ask all the time, there's only 7 principles of influence, but are there more effective times to use them? And we say, yes, there are. If you're looking to build relationships, utilizing a principle of liking or reciprocity, or the principle of unity can help you build better and stronger relationships. If people are in a state of uncertainty, they're not sure what to do, then we try to invoke social proof or the principle of authority. And finally, if we have people that got good relationship with, they're not unsure what to do, but they're just not doing it, we need to motivate their action, then we look to the principles of scarcity and consistency. So that framework, as I thought about this book, and I've been heavily influenced by a man named Dallas Willard, who was a professor of professor of philosophy at the University of Southern California, a Christian man, wrote a lot of books. And I was really influenced by a lot of his writing on our heart, soul, mind, and body. And I started thinking, is there a connection maybe between this core motives model and how we view humans in terms of heart, soul, mind, and body? And I think there is. I think at the heart level is where we build relationship. So we would, again, talk about principle of liking or reciprocity. When we move to our minds, right? When we engage people in the mind, if we can bring in expertise, or we can talk about what lots of other people are doing, social proof, that engages the mind. Our bodies are interesting because I think most of your listeners would probably agree, your body almost has a mind of its own, right? I mean, how often do we say we want to lose 5 pounds and yet we still eat a piece of cake, or we pick something up at the store? It's almost like our body is compelling us. So the principles of scarcity and consistency really come in when it comes to our body, right? When we think we're going to lose something, we have a visceral reaction, a bodily reaction to that. Or when we don't follow through on what we committed to do, right? We don't feel good about ourselves. So those principles work really well there. And then when it comes to our soul, which kind of encompasses the whole person, the heart, mind, and body, I think that's where the principle of unity comes in. And I think that is the closest of the principles to love, because unity is about shared identity, right? You think, Candy, about your relatives or my relatives. We have a new grandson. Emmett's 5 years old. And I just love that kid to death. And I would do anything. I would die for that kid, as I would for my wife and my daughter. So I think that the principle of unity, when we know we have this shared identity with people, brings us to biblically what is called love, which is self-sacrificial for the good of another.
There's so much information, right? Just in there, so much to unpack.
Yeah, I find it, I love learning, and I love making new connections. And I was thrilled when Dr. Cialdini read an advanced copy of the book and said, wow, I've never read anything like this. I've never seen anybody make these connections like you're making with faith-based principles. So that told me I was on to something, that, the godfather of influence, who's probably read just about everything on the subject, has not come across something like this. So that excites me. And I hope it excites people who read the book and can get them to, as I shared earlier, an even deeper level of why they're doing what they're doing with this psychology that Dr. Cialdini has popularized for more than 40 years now.
Mhm. So, is there anything else about your book that you want to mention that I didn't know to ask you a question about?
One of the things that I've done is at the end of every chapter, even though it's a story, there's a box and it's got reflection points. And I would really encourage people. I would be flattered if they just read right through because they're like, "Wow, this is a great story." But I really hope people will either go back and reread and use the reflection point, or as they read, use that reflection point to think, how is what the main character or other characters are going through, how does that impact me? Am I like them at all? Do I ever go through some of the same things? Maybe if I do, I could draw from what they're doing so that I can enjoy that ethical influence and the success that comes with it. Also, if people are reading it, for a book club or something like that, to be able to use those as talking points. So that's another avenue. And then the final thing I would say too is even when you're finished with the story, there's a pretty good section at the end where I tie many different Bible verses to different principles. I look in depth at Dallas Willard's framework along with the core motives model. So there's a lot of additional learning for people who like to do that.
Perfect. Well, this has been an interesting discussion too. Again, I'm really glad that you are here to talk about your new book that's coming out. But I know we're coming to the end of the time we have together. So I would like you to just say, what offer would you like to extend to our listeners specifically? I know you also gave before about if they give you the name of the chapter, you'll give them something. But I assume you're going to talk about, this book, how they can get it, and also how they can contact you if they want more information.
Sure. So the book will be available on Amazon in paperback or ebook, and we're shooting for October 21st as the release date. As I mentioned earlier, if you email, and specifically it's called book launch at influencepeople.biz. If you email this title in the subject line of the second chapter, so really you don't have to scan receipts or anything like that. Just I know you bought the book because you know what chapter 2 is. You will get a link to the influencer Secrets to Success and Happiness so that you can read that at your leisure. Anybody who wants to find out more about me, you can go to my website, which is influencepeople.biz. Got lots of videos, been on hundreds of podcasts. There are links to the books. So all of that information is out there. Something that's a free offer for anybody who signs up for my blog, which I've been blogging weekly for more than 15 years. You would get a free copy of another book I wrote called The Game of Influence. Much shorter, it's about a 50-page read, but it will introduce you to Robert Cialdini's principles. Of course, the other way is LinkedIn. If you go out to LinkedIn, I'm happy to connect with you. I post pretty much daily. So you will continue to learn about these concepts in almost like a drip marketing fashion.
Mm-hmm. And I've seen a lot of your posts on there too, and you do have a lot of great content. So I would definitely recommend people follow you there on LinkedIn so they can learn more from those posts as well. But thank you again so much, Brian, for being a guest on my show and discussing your new book. I really enjoyed our discussion today.
Oh, you're welcome. Thank you for having me on.
Mm-hmm. And to you, listener, if you enjoyed today's episode, be sure to check out the show notes for more information about Influence from Above and how you can connect further with Brian. Remember, the way to influence others today can create an eternal impact tomorrow. Thank you for tuning in today. Would you please share this episode with those you know and leave a review on your favorite platform? And if you find our show informative, would you consider being a financial sponsor to help me continue my mission to educate business owners? A link is located in the episode description, and no amount is too small. I'd really appreciate your support. If you are interested in connecting with our guest and receiving the offer they had to share, a link to our resource page is in the show notes. Finally, if you have any bookkeeping or payroll needs, reach out to us at 310-534-5577 or contact@abandp.com. My team and I are eager to assist you. Until next time, have a great day.
Thank you for listening to Biz Help for You. Please join your host, Candy Messer, again next time. Have a terrific day.